get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs. Coming up tonight, the protests against Rishi Sunak's planned new oil and gas licences have arrived at his front door. And yes, I mean literally at his front door, his home address. What do you make to this? Should it ever be okay to get yourself to someone's private property and protest there? I say absolutely not, and a line has been crossed. But what say you? And are you over 50? If so, see ya, get on your bike and maybe, I don't know, deliver pizzas. That is a suggestion aimed at you guys tonight. What do you make to that? Common sense or a little bit ludicrous? And get this, it has been claimed in public opinion is flagrantly disregarded whenever it doesn't align with the views of the ruling class, and apparently an uprising may be coming. Is that fair, reasonable, realistic or not? And would you live next door to a traveller site? That is the question posed on a leaflet by the Welsh Secretary. That has been called racist. Is it? We'll have it all to come and more. But before we do that, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story today, the Bank of England has raised its interest rate for the 14th time in a row. It's increasing it from 5 to 5.25%. That's the highest base rate since 2008. The bank says it expects inflation to be halved by the end of the year, and that's one of the government's key priorities. The increase puts pressure on borrowers, mortgage holders and households struggling with budgets. But the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, told GB News the government's plan is working.
Well, the Bank of England forecasts today say that we will avoid recession, and in a year's time we'll get inflation down to about 3%, 2.8% I think is the number. So although it's very tough when interest rates go up for families or for businesses that have got loans, what those forecasts are saying today is that if we stick to the plan, it is working, and we will end up with a soft landing and we can avoid a recession.
But the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says the government does need to take action.
Well, the rate rise that we've seen today is just another hammer blow to families across the country who are seeing their mortgages increase when it comes to remortgaging. At the moment, a family that's looking to remortgage their property is going to be paying, on average, more than £200 extra every single month, and for some people it's much more than that. Now, of course, the Bank of England have independence, and that's as it should be, but the government need to take responsibility for the fact that inflation in the UK is much higher than it is in comparable countries.
Well, the Bank of England also says food prices are likely to remain high for the rest of the year. Whilst it says there's wide agreement that food price inflation has now peaked and should fall by the end of the year, they say as well that it could take time for that reduction to hit the shelves. Meanwhile, the high street retailer Wilko has warned it's on the brink of collapse, putting around 12,000 jobs at risk. The boss of the homeware chain says it expects to go into insolvency after failing to secure a takeover to help the business with mounting cash pressures. Wilko, which has around 400 UK stores, has filed a notice of intention to appoint administrators at the High Court. Residents of Crawley in Sussex were disappointed by the news.
It's very bad. Very bad.
It's a shame.
What do you think's gone wrong?
Goodness only knows. I went to uni, I actually shopped here, so...
Do you think it could be management error, management mistakes?
I don't know.
Walking round, I wondered if that was the case.
Why?
It's just so empty.
Oh, that's devastating, because I do a lot of shopping here because they're very good, actually, you know. The thing I found here, I couldn't find it in B&Q.
4 activists that scaled the Prime Minister's home in North Yorkshire and got on the roof have been arrested on suspicion of causing criminal damage and being a public nuisance. A 5th person's also been arrested on suspicion of causing a public nuisance. They remain in police custody. The protesters draped Rishi Sunak's home in black fabric in protest against the 100 new North Sea oil and gas licences, which have been granted by him. He says he won't apologise for supporting that exploration. GB News asked the Greenpeace CEO if turning up at the Prime Minister's private home is justified.
We checked before going. We made sure there was nobody there. It was planned with utmost care, with care for security. He wasn't there. We knocked on the door. First, there was no answer.
He knocks on the door, so he jumps on his roof. Is that right?
We knocked on the door to identify who we were and what we were doing. And then first there was no answer. Then the staff came in. We had a nice chat with them. And then
you jumped on his roof.
We delivered the message that what he's doing is unacceptable in a climate emergency. He's the Prime Minister, and this decision, let me finish, is on him.
Well, you can see more of that interview on Dan Wootton tonight from 9 p.m. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister says asylum seekers will be on the Bibby Stockholm barge in the coming weeks. The first group of migrants was originally scheduled to move into the controversial accommodation moored off Dorset on Tuesday. The delay has been caused by issues surrounding health and safety for port workers and, we're told, not fire safety. Although Oliver Dowden says he's confident the problems can be addressed after firefighters warned the vessel is a potential death trap. The Science Secretary has accused a Labour MP of misleading the public after he shared a fake image of the Prime Minister online. MP for Hull East, Carl Turner, posted a doctored picture showing Rishi Sunak at a beer festival with a badly pulled pint and a woman behind him seemingly looking on disapprovingly. Michelle Donnellan described sharing the deepfake image as pretty desperate stuff by Labour. Mr Turner later said he hadn't realised the image was fake. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker at home by saying play GB News. Back now to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Polly. I found it quite fascinating, that story there about Wilko. What do you make? Are you a Wilko shopper? Is that sad news for the high street? Is it a sign of the times? I've seen the Tories getting the blame for it today. They get the blame for everything, quite frankly, don't they? And I'd be fascinated to know what that fella brought from Wilko's that he says he couldn't get in B&Q or wherever it was. Whenever I've been in Wilko, I've got to say, I've always found it pretty empty. And do we need shops like that now? You've got your eyes at B&M, they're flying, aren't they? Home Bargains, you've got your middle aisle, aren't you, at Aldi and Lidl and all those kind of places. So is it a sign of the times or is it something else? You get in touch and tell me your thoughts. Alongside me, by the way, till 7 o'clock tonight, leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin, and the contributing editor at Novara Media, Michael Walker. I've got lots coming your way tonight. I want to ask you about that leaflet, the traveller site leaflet. Did you see that? It's been called racist. It's been reported to the police. They're asking, would you live next door to a traveller site? I'm talking to Alfie Best before the end of the programme, a well-known traveller as well, a very successful one, I have to say, and getting his thoughts on it. I want to talk about whether or not we're going to have a potential uprising in this country as well. And also over 50s being told, get on your bike and go deliver things like pizza. What do you make to that? Sensible or not? Get in touch with me and let me know all your thoughts tonight. GBviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at GBnews. Jerry, you were one of my first emails tonight telling me I look like I've come dressed as the Queen from a playing card. I'll take that as a compliment. And Richard says, you look fantastically debonair this evening and I love watching your news show. That's really nice, Richard, but you called me Debbie. That's not my name. I am Michelle, but I'll take the compliment anyway. Why not, eh? Right, 5 Greenpeace protesters have been arrested for getting on top of Rishi Sunak's house. They basically, I don't know if you've seen it, they've draped all of this kind of black screen in case you haven't seen it yet. They've got all of this kind of fabric. They're putting it all over his house. They're saying it's in protest about these things like the new oil and gas licences. They reckon it was all right to do it because he's on holiday with his family and all the rest of it. I think it's pretty damn disgraceful, quite frankly, and I do not know who these lot actually think that they are. I think they've crossed a line when it comes to what is acceptable and what is not in protest. But David, where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I mean, people like this doing these kinds of protests have crossed one line after another over the last couple of years. And we had the 2 men who scaled the Queen Elizabeth Bridge in Dartford. That was terribly, destructive to traffic. I mean, it stopped traffic going for like 24, 36 hours. I mean, that was really bad. This is another line that they've crossed going to private property. I'm not sure how they got in. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any security there, which is very surprising. But you should not go to people's private homes and do this kind of thing in their own, property.
What do you think, Michael?
I can see why it's controversial. I mean, I think it would be out of order if there were 2 conditions which were met. So one, if there were people there. So obviously you don't want to scare someone's kids, however much you disagree with their policies. And 2, if that house, the address of it wasn't already public knowledge. Now, everyone already knows what Rishi Sunak's house looks like because there was the controversy over his £250,000 swimming pool. And I think it's not a coincidence that these protests always skirt on the bounds of acceptability. The reason they do these actions whereby some people will disagree and some people will agree with the motives or the means, the tactics, is that means on shows like this we have a debate about it, and then on shows like this we also get to talk about the outrage.
But do you think it's all right that they've gone to his house and done this?
I think because they knew he was away, it's OK. And because we already knew Rishi Sunak's address. As I say, I think if there were any risk that there would be kids in the house, it would be unacceptable. I think if there was any risk that would be doxing them, so revealing his address, that would be unacceptable. But neither of those conditions are met.
Yeah, but hang on a second, because, yeah, it's public knowledge that Rishi and his family are in California or wherever it is on their holiday. But these people, they don't know. family members. Rishi could have said to his, I don't know, whoever it is, guess what? The house is going to be empty the next week. Why don't you guys go and stay there, chill out, enjoy the grounds, the gardens? They don't know whether or not anyone is in it. Not anybody in that house. Not anybody in that house. I just think, who on God's green earth do you think that you are, that you can go to somebody's home, private home, just because you disagree, actually, with their professional policies? That's his job. So in his job, he's done something that you disagree with. So taking that to his house, I think is disgraceful. And I'm struggling to understand why you're kind of saying it's all right because you think no one was in.
Well, they also said, so in the interview you just showed, which I hadn't seen beforehand, the co-director of Greenpeace had said, we knocked on the door, we spoke to the staff. They clearly knew that
so
no
there was
one
people in
was...
then?
Yeah, but they told the staff what was going on. So I don't think
so then there was people in.
But there's no suggestion that anyone was scared by that, because also that was their work. The staff, that's their workplace, right? And I think we probably all accept that it's okay to take direct action.
But so now that you know that someone
was
in, because you said a minute ago, if there was no one in, then it was all right. But now that you know that there was someone in, because you just said you've seen it for the first time there, so now you know that there was someone in, does that change your view?
No, because they're at their workplace.
All right, but if they're in, but so as long as someone, right, so you think it's okay to go to someone's house as long as there's nobody in, but there can be someone in as long as they're working there?
Yeah, I think it's okay to go to someone's workplace when they're working there. That's why we often see people drop banners from the Houses of Parliament. Here, I do think it's more controversial to protest at someone's house, but if they're not in and everyone already knows the address, I think it's relatively acceptable. Also, what I would say is Rishi Sunak is doing something very controversial, which is opening up new oil and gas. Now, the UN General Secretary, the International Energy Agency, they have all said this is extremism. This is incredibly radical. This is incredibly unhelpful to do, especially in this period of time where we're having the hottest summer on record. Climate change is happening right now. So I do see why campaigners or organisations such as Greenpeace thinks it is worth taking actions which they know will be controversial because what they're protesting against is so extreme. It's also worth, I think, really emphasising that this is not some marginal view that these people at Greenpeace have. What they are doing is bringing to the attention of the British public what the UN General Secretary is saying, what the International Energy Agency is saying. And I think it is really important that everyone in Britain is aware that the leaders of these international organisations are completely outraged by Rishi Sunak's decision to open new oil and gas when we're currently in, as I say, the hottest summer on record.
It's not their business, though, is it? What Rishi Sunak decides to do as domestic energy policy, that has got nothing to do, or
well, it
very
will affect
little to
everyone
do
because
with
climate change does affect everyone.
Yeah, but the heads of the UN sit there turning around saying it's things like we don't have global warming, we have global boiling. And I sit there and I look and I think you just sound a bit ridiculous and a bit hysterical, so I zone out a little bit. But anyway, David.
Yeah, I mean, that's alarmism, isn't it? And these people are perfectly entitled to have their view, but there's a proper, legitimate way to protest that and to tell people what they think. And it's not going to someone's house. If they want to protest about it, there's two things they could do. They could go outside Parliament, in Parliament Square, which is a place which is well known that everyone can protest in without causing much disruption to everyday ordinary people and also respecting people's private property. And they can also put themselves forward.
Let me ask you this. A viewer, Stuart, has just been in touch. He says, go on, Greenpeace. I fully support their actions. He says, what's more troubling than the actions of Greenpeace is media outlets like you on GB News now constantly criticising peaceful protests. So he's asking, if they're not allowed to do this, Stuart's asking, so how do you suggest that anyone protest then?
Yeah, well, they should put themselves forward for election, shouldn't they? If they want to do that, so if they actually want to change the law and they want to stop the oil and gas contracts and that they've got going on now, which I think is a good thing, actually. I don't agree with the climate alarmism that they're putting forward. If they want to do that, well, they should put them forward, join the Green Party or something and stand for election.
So you think no protest, and if you want to make a point, stand for election?
No, they can have a protest,
well,
but the protest should be done legitimately.
They
should be done legitimately in somewhere like Parliament Square, you know, where there's been a history of protests. That's the place you go and protest.
So to answer Stuart's question, because he's saying, how do you suggest, and your answer to that is, go to Parliament Square and protest there. But then that means that every other day, every other hour, every random's going to be protesting stuff in Parliament Square, so no one's going to pay any attention then because it'll just be the same old day, same old cause, whatever. They won't get the attention.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why they've done it. They've done this to get the attention, but it's wrong because they shouldn't be impinging on someone's private property.
And if so many people, I'm waving my pen, I'm going to put my pen down, my mum would tell me off, that's bad manners. If so many people are so concerned, you're saying like loads of people concerned about this agenda, why do, for example, the Green Party get pretty much nowhere in things like elections if everyone is so passionate about the causes that you refer to?
Well, I don't think anyone would claim that this is necessarily a majority opinion yet in the public. And why Greenpeace are taking actions such as this is because they want to make more of the public aware of the extreme action which Rishi Sunak has taken. And I think this also comes with an analysis of the media, right? So you're saying if people want to change policy, they can go get elected. Now, we do have a long history of civil disobedience in this country as a way to get your voice heard. We also have, and I have a very strong critique of the fact that so much of our media in this country is owned by very rich, wealthy people, which means that unless you have billionaire backers, one of the only ways to try and shape the media agenda is to take extreme, controversial actions such as this. The only way to get in the headlines is to do something controversial. It's much easier to set the agenda if you have billionaire mates who will help you start a channel for £20 million. It's much harder if you are an environmental protester and the billionaire oil barons aren't so keen on your agenda.
Well, some of these groups, like Just Stop Oil, they have billionaire or millionaire backers. I mean, they're not short of a bob or two. But, you know, I would still say this is not an extreme opinion. This is a majority opinion that people do not want climate alarmism. We don't want net zero policies. We don't.
The majority of the public want net zero.
No, I don't think so. I don't.
Well, the polling shows that.
I don't think so. I think that's what we're getting through some of the mainstream media channels and through the main political
You think
parties.
the pollsters have just made it all up and actually people are against net zero?
You can't tell sometimes the polls, you know, they do surveys which get them the right results by asking the right questions. But I know a lot of people who want to carry on using their petrol and diesel cars. If you said to people, do you want petrol and diesel cars to be banned in 2030, which is what the Conservative Party is saying, the majority of people will say, no, I don't want to have to give up my petrol and diesel cars. If you ask people, would you want to give up your gas boilers and have a heat pump, they would say no. If you said, would you want more expensive electricity because we're going to get rid of all our coal, oil and gas and go to wind and solar, people would say no because they don't want more expensive electricity bills. So it depends on what question you ask people, what result you get in a poll.
So I think you hit on an important point there. What the polls generally say is people do back net zero. They are very concerned about climate change. They do want policies to try and stop it or to limit it. I think that's the only thing that's possible right now. What they do say is that they don't want to have to pay loads of money to do that, and I think that's very reasonable. I think that's why we have to, in this country, put higher taxes on the super wealthy so that the government can make sure that people don't have to spend extra of their income on an electric car, for example. We can do this with smart policy.
I always eye-roll, I'm going to be honest. I just eye-roll when I hear this kind of, oh, we need to tax the super wealthy, we need to tax the super... It just makes me eye-roll a little bit because when you look at, in terms of income tax, the top 1%, I think they pay something like 28, 29% of all the income tax in this country. When you broaden it out to the top 10%, I think they pay something like, is it the top 60% or something of all income tax comes from the top 10%. So it's like the wealthy, they already pay a small fortune.
Well, so the big issue here is wealth, I think, as much as income. So you've got lots of people who are sitting on a lot of property, a lot of wealth. And have you met the super rich? I mean, I used to be a private tutor and I've been in some of these people's houses and we could definitely tax them a lot more than we currently do. So people got a lot richer over the COVID pandemic. People have got, or inequality has increased since the 1980s. So there are a lot of rich people with a lot of money which we could tax. Now, there are a lot of media organisations that want to distract from that. Often they are owned by billionaires, right? And why is it the case that billionaires want a bunch of media outlets that tell people it's impossible to tax the rich?
What I find interesting, I'm not part of the elite, 1% super wealthy and all the rest of it. And I've always said, in fact, all my life, I think I've always said, irrespective of my finances, that I think actually taxing the rich, overtaxing the rich is ridiculous. And when you say people are concerned about net zero, I'm not surprised, quite frankly, because look at any weather forecast in this day and age, the shades of red that they use, I found it a little bit pathetic, quite frankly, because I dread to think what you're going to do once you've used all of your hysterical reds up. Where are you going to go? What colour are we going to have next? We're going to have black? Where are we going to go after all of this red has been used up? What do you make to it all? Your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. That's how you get hold of me. Now, are you over 50? If so, you've been told to get out on your bike, basically, do a bit of delivering here and there and all the rest of it to help you with the cost of living crisis. Patronising or good old common sense? You tell me.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Tonight on Farage, a GB News Investigates exclusive reveals the Muslim chaplain working in an NHS hospital who took a trip to meet the Taliban. A delegation of British imams, including an NHS chaplain, have been photographed alongside a Taliban minister in Afghanistan, who has boasted about enlightening minds about jihad. The imam says that he is on a charity trip, but that charity was previously investigated for links to individuals associated with terror group Al-Qaeda. Tonight we ask, should an NHS chaplain be meeting ministers in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan? The full story at 7, only on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry till 7 o'clock alongside the leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin, and the contributing editor at Novara Media, Michael Walker. I had a point to make to you and I remembered it now. I forgot it before the break. When we're talking about, media outlets that can only be created by these rich billionaires or whatever it is, there was a story today, I think it was front page of The Telegraph, if my memory from this morning serves me right, all about Ofcom, basically saying that people are watching less and less TV these days. It's more about online content. So actually, anyone these days, if you've got yourself a camera phone, which most people have, set up your own media channel then. And I know you, that's exactly what you guys did.
We have done that. We get 6 million views a month.
So what are you moaning about then?
But we do have less impact on mainstream politics. So what I would say is I think we've been doing our... No, I think... Well, I'd like to think I'm a very good communicator, but because we don't have a TV studio in central London, because we don't have a licence to be a broadcast channel, we don't have politicians who feel that they have to come on our show. And that does, I think, give us less influence on the mainstream political agenda. And to get on shows like this, where you do have a central London studio, it's very easy for you to get cabinet ministers in and shadow cabinet ministers in.
Well, given the choice, we'd have a studio in Hull if any of the bosses listen. I'd move there in a
maybe lobby for that, but you can see what I'm saying. So I think it is possible for lots of people to gain a viewership online, as we have done at Novara Media, but also
it's the influence
it's harder to get influence.
The influence,
yeah.
right? I've got it, registered it, right. Sandy says, I've been a member of Greenpeace since the 70s. I've always supported their activities, but I do not agree with this. Marilyn says, where were the police protecting Rishi Sunak's house? I think you raise a fascinating point there, Marilyn, about how on earth is it possible to just randomly wander up to the Prime Minister's house and do whatever? Because today, quite frankly, it was people shoving a bit of fabric over the window. Who knows what it could be tomorrow? So, yeah, that is quite alarming, actually, in terms of the seemingly lack of security at that property. And good luck, by the way, if anyone does decide to try and defend their property in this day and age, because I don't think people should be able to protest at your property, but heaven help you if you try and defend your property. Of course, the law, it feels like often it is on the side of the people that are doing stuff that they shouldn't be, as opposed to the people that just want to defend their home. But don't even get me started on that topic. Let's talk over 50s, shall we? It's been suggested that over 50s get on their bikes. This is according to Mel Stride, the Works and Pensions Secretary. It's all about the kind of cost of living crisis and how people can help alleviate that in their own lives. Kevin says, what a nerve, over 50s to get on their bike. He says, why aren't they aiming it at the under 20s? He says, oh, I know, because they wouldn't be able to deliver stuff because they'd all still be laying in bed. Andy says, I'm 57 and I took my pension early, best thing I ever did. I've got a message for the government. You get on your bike and go and get stuffed, he says. Michael, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I know Mel Stride has spoken to someone in his 50s, I think, who has started working for Deliveroo and found it reasonably enjoyable and productive for his life. I think that's probably not going to apply to many over 50s. I don't think it's going to be a particularly attractive job.
Well, Deliveroo recorded a 62% increase in riders aged over 50 since 2021.
Well, I suppose what was that from and to? Also, I think we've got to talk about, we've got to talk about what choices you're giving people. I think it's also important to note here that there is a bit of a lottery when it comes to who over 50 will feel they need to work or not, because the reason so many people went out of the workforce during COVID-19 is because lots of people from that generation own a home. It's gone up in value over the last 2 decades, and they can basically retire on the basis of that. Now, my parents are in that category. You know, they could retire early. They didn't work harder than anyone else, but what they did do was buy a house in London in the early 80s. It's gone up in price by about 10 times, and that means that you have that cushion, which lots of other people won't have. So I think it is somewhat unfair for the Conservatives basically to say to people, if you've worked hard all your life, but you're not lucky enough to own a house in a big city, why don't you go work for Deliveroo?
But it's only a suggestion, though. He's not saying to people. He's not actually saying to people, isn't he? Right, you. By the way, I find this notion that over 50s is old. I find that really peculiar. But if I park that to a side, because I don't think 50 is the age where you're suddenly old. But anyway, if I park that, he's not saying to people, right, you there, up you get, and on that bike. What he's saying is, basically, in today's society, the job market has evolved. There are many opportunities that are flexible. You can do as much or as little as you want. A lot of people perhaps might not be aware of the so-called gig economy and how it could work. So it was just a suggestion.
Yeah, I think it's mildly, insensitive for him to say that, because,
Why?
I don't think there's a lot of over 50s who would want to go out and start working for Deliveroo and cycling around to delivering.
Why not? What's wrong with that?
No, it's nothing wrong with that at all. And some people are doing it. Like you said, they've had an increase in the number of people who are doing it, but it's not something for everybody. But I think, what he's saying...
What's insensitive? You're not a snowflake, David Kent, so why do you think it's insensitive?
I'm not,
What's the matter with you?
Because, times are hard at the moment. We've had a very, very hard time with the COVID. The economy has been messed up because of the government's policies. I mean, I completely disagree with the lockdown that happened, and that has caused a lot of small and medium-sized businesses to go bankrupt. So a lot of people's lives have been completely turned upside down because of what happened over the last 3 years. And we're in a situation now where the security that some people had before the COVID period has gone. It's evaporated. So some people are in a situation now, they find themselves in, a situation situation where they don't have a job, where they don't have the security that they expected to have through a lifetime of work because of what happened over the last 3 years. So I think for those people who are in that situation, it is a bit insensitive. I mean, I'm not snowflake at all, but I mean, this advice is some advice you could give to someone of any age. You know, if you don't have a job, go and get a job. And if you need to retrain, go and retrain, look at other opportunities, and that's fine. I know a lot of people in their 50s now who have retrained as lorry drivers, for example. That's another option, and they're doing fine. They're getting on fine.
You see, I think one of the reasons that they're getting at here is that 8.6 million people are classed as economically inactive, and more than 3.4 million of them are over 50 but under the age of retirement. Now, Andy just messaged, he says he retired early, he didn't want to work, and good for you. But I think, and I am not Mel Stride, obviously, but I think what they're trying to do is kind of trying to galvanise and make more productive a workforce that perhaps might be sitting there and thinking, well, I don't know what I could do. What options are there available for me? Am I past it? Will anyone employ me? Am I too old or whatever? And the government can't win, because when it comes to things like, I don't know, just say food bank usage, if anyone from the government dare utter a sentence such as, I don't know, or, you know, as opposed to doing this, what about trying to do that? Then they get absolutely lambasted for being out of touch and insensitive. If now they're saying to people, look, maybe you're not aware, the workplace has evolved, there's this whole new way of working available to people, then they get told that they're insensitive. They can't really win, can they?
Well, I mean, on one level, I agree with you that we potentially focus too much on what this politician or that politician has said, and then we get offended by it. I think the policy matters more here. And I think we can probably all agree that, you know, working until you're 65 doesn't need to be a bad thing, right? For lots of people, that brings their life value, it gives them dignity, it keeps them going out of the house on a regular basis. So I'm not saying everyone should be able to retire early. I obviously prefer it to be more of a choice than people feeling that they're forced to work for a long time.
Let me very quickly ask you this. Rob, he says, I'm 72 and I would welcome the idea of a part-time job to boost my state pension. He says, how about letting pensioners work tax-free as an incentive to get us back into the workplace? What do you make to that?
I think that sounds like a very good idea.
There you go, Rob. He likes it. Get your suggestion in, Rishi Sunak. You never know. He could potentially take you up on that. Would you think it's fair for a pensioner to return to the workplace and not have to pay tax at all? That's viewer Rob's suggestion. I'll open it to you, viewers at home. What do you make to that? Good idea or not? And let me ask you this. Do you think here in the UK it all feels a little bit undemocratic? There's been suggestions that actually here the needs and the wants and all the rest of it of minority groups are now superseding that of the majority population. Is that accurate? Some saying a suggestion that perhaps an uprising in some form is on the way. What do you make? Your thoughts?
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Some wet and windy weather heading in for Friday night and Saturday, but for many, Friday will be a dry and a bright day with perhaps a bit more sunshine than we've had of late. The wet and windy weather for Saturday coming from this area of low pressure. Ahead of it, though, a ridge of high pressure is trying to move in. It's not completely across the UK, though, so still some heavy showers around this evening, and indeed overnight we'll keep some going over eastern Scotland and eastern England. The odd one further west, but many places will become dry overnight with some clearer spells and temperatures dipping down to about 11 to 14 in most towns and cities. So on to Friday, and as I said, many places will be dry and bright, certainly in the west, across these eastern counties of England and indeed across much of the Midlands, probably to be quite a cloudy start, and there will be further outbreaks of rain over northeast England. And then in the afternoon, heavy showers could break out across Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the far southeast. Many western areas, though, looking dry and bright, a bit more sunshine than we've seen of late, light winds as well, so feeling pleasant if we do get some sunshine, but temperatures still only high teens, low 20s. And look at this, deep area of low pressure bringing wet and windy weather swinging across the country on Friday night and spreading more widely during Saturday. Northern Scotland will generally stay dry and bright, and it may brighten up in the southwest, but here we'll have the strongest winds. We do have a Met Office warning in place for those winds here and for the heavy rain across Northern Ireland. More details on those weather warnings on the Met Office website.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7, leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin, alongside me and the contributing editor at Novara Media, Michael Walker. So many people disagreeing with you, Michael Walker. You said that it's OK, basically, as long as you think that the occupants are out of the house, it's OK to protest. I have to say, most of my viewers completely, entirely disagree with you. And these days, everyone tells everyone, don't they, when they're going on holiday? It's all over social media. I remember back when I was younger and we used to go on holiday as a family, you used to do everything possible to try and pretend that you wasn't. You used to have timers on your lamps, you used to get your next door neighbour to move your milk bottles, make sure that there was no post hanging out the door. These days, everyone posts their holidays all over social media and then wonders why they get burgled. Madness. Anyway, talking about over 50s doing potential deliveries. Lots of people, Alan says, Michelle, many people over 50 have problems with their joints. It's unrealistic to expect them to be able to do more physical jobs. Terry, as if to prove your point there, he says, I'd love to get on my bike, but I've been waiting for 10 months to see a surgeon for a knee replacement. I'm not laughing at the fact you need a knee replacement. I'm just laughing at the fact that actually you're spot on. Good luck if you are indeed trying to get in to see a surgeon for anything these days. Is there anyone out there that would sit there and go and deliver, I don't know, pizzas, whatever? Dennis says I would be out there riding my bike, but quite frankly, I'd be terrified about getting mugged whilst I was on it. So there you go. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think we're living in a so-called elite dictatorship? That is how one journalist has summarised the UK. I have to say, this is an article that was in The Telegraph. It's actually quite fascinating. It incorporates many different points, David Curtin. But he says things like, he talks about the cartel of Westminster. He says that the three main parties, basically, there's not a drop between them on the key issues. He talks about the fact that public opinion is just completely ignored, basically, on many things, that if there were a referendum to be called on them, that actually those policies would be chucked out of the window if the outcome was to be respected. And he goes on to say that he thinks that perhaps there would be some form of uprising on its way in this country. What says you?
Yeah, well, there needs to be some change. I don't want there to be a violent uprising, but I want there to be a change at the ballot box, which is why I started the Heritage Party, of course, because what I think is that there is a uni-party. They, like you said, they have coalesced in terms of the policy positions that they have, and they are against what the majority of the people want. They are climate alarmists. They, we talked about net zero earlier. They're pushing that. They want to get rid of cars and petrol and diesel cars. They are pushing the trans agenda. We have this relationships and sex education in school and many, many other things. We have mass immigration, and whatever Rishi Sunak is saying about it and whatever bills he's putting through Parliament, it goes on and on and on, and people don't want these kind of things. And on any of those issues, like you say, if there was a referendum, people would vote against that. We would vote to control our borders. We would vote to protect children from sexualisation in schools. We would vote to keep our cars and things like this. We would vote to have cheap energy. We would probably vote not to go to war in Ukraine and escalate that as well. That's another issue. So I think that there's all of these things that all the parties have coalesced on, and we need a change. I mean, I was at the forefront of the freedom movement, if you like, during the lockdown. I opposed lockdowns. I opposed the no jab, no job regulations that they brought in. And I think at that point there was a bit of an uprising and a pushback, and then the lockdowns were lifted and the no jab, no job regulations were lifted as well. There needs to be something else like that.
I hope you
today.
don't take credit for that, because I like to take credit for the no jab thing myself. We did an Outdate the Mandate campaign on this programme. I remember it well, actually. Anyway, what do you make to all this topic?
No, I mean, I'm in some agreement with this article. I think for different reasons, though. I think there are a lot of people who are ignored in society at the moment, and I think that's because of our two-party system, essentially. So because you've got two parties, you've got first past the post, that means that both parties are appealing to the same group of swing voters who they think will decide the next election. And that means that everyone else gets ignored. Now, one way to resolve that is to have endless referendums on every topic under the sun. The other way is to have proportional representation. So you have a system whereby you can have smaller parties who can gain 10% of the vote and then have 10% of the MPs. Now, what would that mean? That would mean that people like me who want stronger environmental policies, I could vote for the Greens. Then in Parliament, they can negotiate with the other parties to get that through. People like you can vote for probably a more right-wing party, or your own party, I suppose.
Yeah, yes.
And you can have some people in Parliament who want the sort of socially conservative policies that you want, and then they can all negotiate it and come out with some kind of compromise. I think the referendum idea is a bit
you say that as though it's like you say, oh yeah, they'll all negotiate it and reach some kind of compromise, as though it's like a really simple thing. At this moment in time, bearing in mind the Tories have got an 80-seat majority, it takes them a lot of time and effort to try and pass things. So if you've got this kind of hung Parliament with all of these fragmented groups representing completely polar opposite opinions, trying to quote you, negotiate, that is going to be quite a complex, long-winded, some would say, worse situation than one we've got now.
Well, in a way, there's actually lots of benefits to that. So one of the reasons or one of the theories behind why sort of Germany and France have stronger levels of growth than we do is because they have more policy continuity. What we have in this country is you've got one majority to another majority. As soon as the Tories get into power, they want to change everything. As soon as Labour get into power, they want to change everything. Very difficult for businesses to plan ahead. What you get in somewhere like Germany, for example, is policy does change more slowly, but it tends to change in a more sort of rational way, and you end up with a more stable economy, and it's more productive.
What I find fascinating as well is voting habits. I think often people just almost vote the same way that they've always done because their granddad did, their grandma did, the mum did, the dad did, they did. And it's almost like a habit as opposed to perhaps sometimes a considered choice based on the detail of what people are saying. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Get in touch and tell me your thoughts. And would you support proportional representation? Is that the answer to all the woes of this country, or would it make things worse? And look, right, I've got a really interesting topic I want to touch on before we finish this programme. Simple question. Want to, or would you be comfortable living next door to a gypsy or traveller site? It has been called racist, that leaflet. The police are involved. Is it racist to say that? Your thoughts?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry till 7 o'clock. The leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin, and the contributing editor at Novara Media, Michael Walker, alongside me tonight. Now, the Conservative MP, David T.C. Davies, he has been criticised for sending out a leaflet asking if his constituents were basically aware that a gypsy and traveller site was coming to their area. The Welsh Secretary has now been defended by the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, for his actions. There were a few things on this leaflet, but for example, what they're trying to basically hint at is they're saying that the Labour Party is going to be pushing for new sites to open up, and then they're asking people, would you be happy to live next door to a traveller site? Now, it's all kicked off basically. There's been reports to the police and all the rest of it, and it's been said that this is very racist to even ask that question. So, joining me now down the line is Alfie Best. Some would say he's one of UK's best-known travellers, certainly one of the richest out there. He's also the chairman of Wildcrest Parks in Essex. Good evening, Alfie. Obviously, you'll be familiar with this story now and the criticism about it, so particularly around the question of would you, for example, want to live next to a traveller and gypsy park? Is that racist in your mind?
I think if the question was put another way, would I want to live next to an African American or a black English, I think then you'd have an uprising. So I think the question itself already gives you the answer.
So when you say, because I think that you're quite right, by the way, you wouldn't take the word gypsy or traveller out and be able to insert it with anything else. So why do you think then it is perhaps deemed OK to be able to put that word gypsy or traveller in there and think you can get away with it?
Because I think it's the last accepted abuse. You know, gypsies and travellers, even on, believe it or not, the travellers' sites that are based around the UK, it is actually a criminal offence for anybody that is a non-gypsy to live on those sites and pay rent.
Is that true? And do you think actually there are enough legitimate legal traveller sites in this country, or do you think there needs to be more?
I think in every society they need to benefit from society itself, and there does need to be more gypsy and traveller sites, and they need to be located in the right areas, just like any other society. They need to have access to schools, medical, doctors, just like any other society. Why should they be any different? And look, I fly around the country looking at different parks, and most of the parks that I see with gypsy and traveller sites are actually placed next to sewerage works or next to industrial sites.
So let me ask you this, and I'm going to be quite blunt, so I hope you don't mind, because I think I'm from a place called Hull, and I can visualise right now in my mind's eye a particular park that we've got. And in this park, there have been frequent occasions now where travellers have gone into this park. They've gone all different ways. They've removed bollards, they've taken down things and left that park in an absolute disgraceful position. Litter absolutely everywhere, human excrement on the floor. These are public playing fields. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want to live next door to that mess.
Well, that's not living next door to that mess. And what I would say to you, in every society, there is good, bad and indifferent. You know, there's not one society that's bad and there's not one society that's good.
No, but Alfie, there are laws in this land. There are laws in this land. So if it's not legal to set up a campsite on, for example, a public playing field, then A, you shouldn't be doing it. And if indeed that does then happen, to leave it in an absolute mess, that's not acceptable, is it?
I would agree with you. It's not acceptable and it shouldn't happen. But I go back to what I said just a moment ago. There are good, bad and indifferent in every race. Just because you get a minority few that act outside of the law doesn't mean to say that every one of them is the same.
No, I agree with you.
Otherwise, that would be saying that even people like myself are the same. There are good people in every race.
I'm just going to throw it open to my panel before the end of the programme. David Curtin, what do you make to this?
I don't think it's racist to ask the question, do you want to live next to a traveller site? Because this is a matter of local council policy. And if there's, you know, a politician there talking about what the local plan is going to be, in this case in Monmouthshire, he has every right to say, where should we put the traveller site? Do you want it here or do you want it there? And ask people the question, are you happy with a change in the planning?
Yeah, but come on, hang on, David, because this wasn't like a planning question. We all know that there was something hinted in that question. It wasn't about would you prefer planning-wise it to be there or would you be there. It wasn't that. There was like a hinted, underlined meaning towards it, wasn't there, Michael?
You know, I think that's very disingenuous. I don't think he was expecting the answer to be, oh, let's put it in that field instead of this field. And I do think the point your guest makes there about if this was a different minority is very much the case. I mean, the Conservatives famously and notoriously, infamously, had a flyer in the 1960s which said, if you want an N-word for a neighbour, vote Labour. Now, that has rightly gone down in history as an absolute disgrace, and I think it might be the case that we look back at flyers like this in the same way. Now, I do think there is a problem whereby the government hasn't given enough space for traveller sites, and that creates tensions. But
is Alfie still there? Is Alfie there or has he gone? Alfie, quick question. One of my viewers is asking, and I don't know the answer to this, so maybe you do. He's asking, do gypsies on traveller sites have to pay things like council tax? What's the answer to that question?
Of course they do. No different than any other residential park around the country or any other residential housing estate.
So that's the case on unauthorised travellers. So if someone just rocks up at a playing field, that's the case as well?
No, of course not. Look, you're always going to have, like I've said, your itinerant, you know, that are not the norm. There are a lot of very good gypsies that are out there and travellers that make a good benefit to society.
Roger that. Good note to end on. Alfie, thank you for your time. David, Michael, thanks for yours. Time flies when you're having fun. Don't go anywhere. Nigel Farage up next.
The temperature's rising. Boxed solar. proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Some wet and windy weather heading in for Friday night and Saturday, but for many, Friday will be a dry and a bright day with perhaps a bit more sunshine than we've had of late. The wet and windy weather for Saturday coming from this area of low pressure. Ahead of it, though, a ridge of high pressure is trying to move in. It's not completely across the UK though, so still some heavy showers around this evening, and indeed overnight we'll keep some going over eastern Scotland and eastern England. The odd one further west, but many places will become dry overnight with some clearer spells and temperatures dipping down to about 11 to 14 in most towns and cities. So on to Friday, and as I said, many places will be dry and bright, certainly in the west, across these eastern counties of England and indeed across much of the Midlands, probably to be quite a cloudy start. And there will be further outbreaks of rain over northeast England. And then in the afternoon, heavy showers could break out across Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the far southeast. Many western areas, though, looking dry and bright. A bit more sunshine than we've seen of late. Light winds as well, so feeling pleasant if we do get some sunshine, but temperatures still only high teens, low 20s. And look at this deep area of low pressure bringing